All right, well, let me tell you a little bit about Stan. Stan has worked in the technology and public affairs field for over 30 years. During this time, he's contributed to numerous important public policy and citizen initiatives. His efforts were instrumental in bringing thousands of jobs to Utah. Stan has served on many business association and nonprofit boards. He also served in virtually every grassroots position in the Utah Republican Party, including chairman. Stan has also served in public elective office as well, Provost City Council and Utah State Board of Education. You know, so already I'm thinking, God, how does this guy have enough time to do all that stuff? But yet there's more. So in his spare time, Stan officiates high school basketball, runs marathons, and enjoys golf. He also loves to hike and explore with his wife, Michelle. They have 7 children and 9 grandchildren in a blended family. Stan's late wife, Becky, was the first female Speaker of the House in Utah history. Now, I've said a lot about Utah, but it turns out Stan has deep Washington street cred. He's got deep Washington roots. So growing up, he lived in Tacoma, Fife, Klickitat, and in Lyle on the Columbia River. Stan graduated from Lyle High School, go Cougars, and in his high school class, I think there were about 24 people. It gives you a sense of the size of the class. He went on to Brigham Young University and began his Utah story. But before we go there, just I think of this as sort of a trivia question. After Stan left for Brigham Young, his parents moved for a school district superintendent and teaching job to the smallest town in King County. So what's the smallest town in King County? That, of course, would be the town of Lester. Lester is south of Snoqualmie Pass, and it is west of Cleolum. All right, so I guess that's our homework assignment for later, is to look up on Google Maps where Lester is. So Stan, I want to thank you for joining us. And to get us going, I'm going to begin with a story. And here's the story. 25 years ago, grassroots conservative activists brought ranked choice voting to Utah. I'm told they found it in Robert's Rules of Order. So Stan, I don't want to carry the whole story on my own shoulders. Please finish the story for us.
Yeah, so when we say the words grassroots activist, and I think many of us like to see ourselves in that light, we consider that to be positive, but many times the establishment doesn't see that as overly positive because there's a constant conflict between the activists in the political parties and their leaders. So I was a part of the leadership team at the time, 25 years ago. And as the grassroots activists brought ranked choice voting to Utah, if they were in favor of it, I was against it. So this went on for some time as they tried to make the case. I was just sure that there was some strategy, some game that they were trying to promote and that there's no way it could be better than plurality voting. Well, to make a long story short, when I was in the 4th grade, Miss Bates in Klickitat Elementary School, my 4th grade teacher, I believe, taught me the scientific method, where you create a hypothesis, then you test the hypothesis. And after testing it over and over again, you figure out whether it's a good hypothesis or not. Well, I was testing the ranked choice voting hypothesis. We started using it in our county and state conventions. We took a 10-hour, what is normally a 10-hour convention using multiple round voting, and we turned it into a 3 or 4 hour convention. Well, right away, I'm seeing that's good. I could get out of here in 6 hours with 6 hours to spare and to spend on my own time. It was easy for voters to understand. We didn't have any problems with spoiled ballots with ranked choice voting. Voters liked it. Just all it takes is using it once and they like it. And so over time, my hypothesis was proven to be pretty much the opposite of what I had made it, which is ranked choice voting works really well. Well, then it was time to start digging a little bit deeper. And over time, as my wife was in the legislature, we often talked about the need to have better elections. Utah, 30 or 35 years ago had some of the highest voting turnout in the nation. And then over a period of 35 years, it became one of the lowest voting turnout states in the nation. And it was a big area of concern for our political leaders who understand very well the important nature of voting for the future of our form of government. So we would talk often about what should those changes be. And I just come to the conclusion that ranked choice voting is a positive change all the way around, and that it produces better elections. And that in and of itself is a reason to go do it.
And Stan, I was going to ask you, so you sort of mentioned some of the other reforms or approaches, and how did you see those all combining with each other, or were there some conflicts between them?
Well, you kind of have to, we have a system. I think the best way to handle any system is to look at a pivot from what you're doing to one thing. When we start combining multiple changes at one time, it's hard to see the consequences of our actions and point to one particular thing. So when we lump a whole bunch of changes together, it's really hard to tell which ones are better and which ones aren't so good. And so that's why I like doing them one at a time. And if I had to choose, I'd choose ranked choice voting to start with. And let's see if it really does produce the benefits that we claim. And then after a while, if that works well, let's go look at other changes that can produce better elections. But here's why elections are so important. Thomas Jefferson said, "A well-informed citizenry is the best defense against tyranny." So an informed citizenry, an engaged electorate, an educated voter, those are actually the keys to our form of government working. It is a representative form of government. And whether you want to call it a republic or democracy, it is a representative form of government. And we need those who choose their elected representatives to go to the polls and make a vote. But that's not good enough. It needs to be an educated vote. If you go look at our founders, they didn't allow everyone to vote back in 1776 through 1792. They wanted educated, those voters who were educated to go to the polls. Well, ranked choice voting produces more educated voters. Ranked choice voting encourages us to go to the polls and to be educated, because it's not enough now to just listen to your neighbor say, "Hey, my brother's running for office." No, I got to figure out who my number 2 and my number 3 is. I got to dig a little deeper. I've got to go online. I've got to look at their positions on their website. I need to go see a debate or two, or a candidate forum where I can get a feel for who these candidates are, so I can make those additional choices. And so it's one of the things that I absolutely love, is that it produces a better representative form of government.
Well, Stan, on the flip side, I wanted to ask you what limitations and challenges you see with ranked choice voting, and just as importantly, what responses do you have to those limitations or challenges when people raise them?
Yeah, so here's the interesting part to that question. There are many, many games you can play with plurality voting. And I don't see those games with voters when it comes to ranked choice voting. So let's talk about what those games are under our current system, and then we can talk about what the deal is with ranked choice voting. Under our current system, you're rewarded if you're running for public office and you find your most formidable opponent and you say, "Gee, who can I recruit to run against me who's most like my opponent?" Because if I can sift some votes away from my opponent, I might actually have a better chance of winning. It's called the spoiler effect, but we have it happen often in partisan races where Republicans will go recruit the Green candidate to run in the election, or the Democrats will go recruit a Libertarian to run in an election. Why? Because they want to take votes away from the person that is their most formidable challenger. Here's another game that's played with plurality voting. It's called, what is it called? Well, I'll tell you what it is and then I'll remember. So if you have, let's say, 4 candidates in a race, but it could be 3, it could be 5, it could be 10. But if you have a bunch of candidates that are very similar in philosophy and very similar in where they stand on issues, and maybe their backgrounds, maybe their religious makeup, but if they're similar, many times you can have those candidates split the majority, and you can have a candidate who's maybe a one-issue candidate, or someone who is not well known and is not the favorite of the majority actually slip in and get elected. And it's called vote splitting, and it happens all the time in plurality voting. I'll tell you another game that's played on multi-winner races. In a multi-winner race, in fact, I use this when I go to city councils in our state, and almost always everybody on the council will point to someone that uses this game. In a multi-winner race, let's say in our state, there's city councils where they'll have 3 candidates who win, and they'll all go into a great big race. And so 3 candidates come out of that, and almost always they'll have a primary, and then they'll have a general election, and they'll wean the field in order to get to those 3 winners. If you tell your supporters in a plurality election to only vote for you, you actually get a statistical advantage in getting elected. So even though a voter has the power to choose 3 candidates to be elected for them, if they feel strongly enough about that candidate that says only vote for me, then many times that candidate can get a statistical advantage in the race and have a better chance at getting elected. And lo and behold, it works. It's a game that works. That does not work under ranked choice voting. None of those games that I've suggested work. I had a city council member in Highland, Utah the other night say, well, Stan, what are the games for ranked choice voting? And I had to tell her, I have no idea. I don't believe there are any games. Certainly not in my basket of research have I figured out what those games are. Because you can, with full confidence, vote for the candidate you like the best as your #1 choice. And then the candidate that you like second best. You don't sit there and say, well, wait, does that hurt my first choice? No, it does not hurt your first choice at all. And so on and so forth. You can go down the line. You can freely vote for who you want to in order and not hurt the ones that are higher up the food chain. So it's very powerful for a citizen to be able to do that. I call it the great thing about ranked choice voting is that it is a fuller expression of voter will. And in a process that's so important, we're electing those who are going to represent us. You want the voter will to be expressed at the fullest level. And so that's why ranked choice voting is so great. I'll tell you another issue with plurality voting that I really dislike. Many times voters feel like they have to vote for someone they don't like the most in order to prevent someone they dislike more from getting elected. So in Utah in 2016, we had Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton running for office. And a third-party candidate with Utah roots came to our state named Evan McMullin. And almost immediately, the voters globbed on to McMullin, and he started rising in the polls. And when he got to about 20%, the Trump campaign started getting the message out, a vote for McMullin is a vote for Clinton. And very quickly, he crested and started going down. Why? Because voters now had to start figuring out that even though they might like McMullin better, if they voted for him, there was a greater chance someone they disliked even more, Hillary Clinton, was going to get elected. And so that's a game that is played often. It forces voters into a position where you've got to calculate, well, I know I like that person the best, but they may not have a chance of winning. So now do I need to find who's most likely to be at the very end and vote for them? It's an incredibly, I think it's a damaging calculation we're asking them to make, because we go away from the heart of what elections are about. People that we support the most should be the people that we place first on our ballots. And so those are the games that are played. When it comes to ranked choice voting, I'm unaware of any games with the voter. It's simple, it's easy. Truly, voters are skeptical of ranked choice voting until they use it once. The fact that you're going to use it tonight, by the time people, they might be on here right now, if they've never used ranked choice voting, they'd be skeptics. I'd expect that. But by the time they leave tonight, they're going to have a ranked choice voting election and see how easy it is to truly use. And I expect that after they're done using it, they're going to say, wow, that was easy. I like ranked choice voting. It happens all the time in our electorate here in Utah. Until they use it the first time, it's kind of like, well, I want the devil I know versus the devil I don't. But once they use ranked choice voting, it only takes once. They're like, I like this. It's easy. It's simple. And I'm able to more fully express my will as a voter.
So thanks, Dan. I have a couple of questions to take advantage of your prominence as a conservative advocate for ranked choice voting. And then after that, we'll get questions from the other folks joining us tonight. And so everyone else, if you have some questions, start thinking about putting them into the chat and we can tee them up. So Stan, my question is, what would you say the state of support for ranked choice voting among the conservative community is? How should we think about it?
Well, at its core, if you have a center-left electorate, it's more likely that the candidate who wins is going to be center-left. And if you have a center-right electorate, it's more likely that you're going to get an elected official who is center-right. In Utah, the tabulation that we use provides winners with the candidates that have the broadest and the deepest support. That means in Utah, as a red state that is more center-right, our center-right candidates will almost always get elected. So it isn't bipartisan. It's kind of apolitical. It's just a methodology, and the methodology doesn't favor any political party. It favors the voters. It favors the of the voters. That's what it favors.
And another question related to that, I've read some things that sort of indicate that parts of the main GOP are opposed to ranked choice voting. And why is that? What's your take on that?
So as a conservative Republican, when we're slower to change than Democrats are, we're just slower to change. We're more traditional in our approach to government. We always tend to look back at the Constitution. So, I mean, not only are we slow to change, but it takes over 200 years sometimes to try to persuade us. We're still not there. And there's a sense of individualism where I've studied the Constitution. I am well versed in my philosophy of government, and I don't want to see change. I'm comfortable where I'm at. So it's harder to persuade conservative and Republicans to like ranked choice voting. It's a change. It's a big change. I make no bones about it. You change the way that you elect your representatives. That is a big change. So that's the challenge. They start off from a place of liking tradition. So the second problem that we have, though, is when we watch it in use, we're always suspicious of new things. Progressives like lots of change. So they constantly have conservatives back on their heels, having to judge changes that they're kind of foisting upon us. And so you are always kind of in that suspicious mode. I think that's the challenge. But here's Maine and ranked choice voting in a nutshell. Paul LePage, for all of his good qualities, and I'm sure he had some wonderful qualities, he had absolutely no filter in what came out of his mouth. And he just said what was on his mind. Now, some of us like straight shooters. Paul LePage was a straight shooter. But by having no filter, he was an equal opportunity offender. He offended everyone. And so it's no surprise that every time he ran for office, many candidates would rise up to oppose him because he had said things that offended them and offended groups that they affiliated with. And so he got elected by splitting the vote. He used the classic game of plurality voting to get elected. Well, finally, the residents of the great state of Maine said, wait a second, the majority's not electing our governor anymore. Let's try something where the majority of citizens get to elect our governor. And so they proposed ranked choice voting, I believe, as a direct consequence of electing a governor who kept splitting the vote and playing games with the traditional plurality system. Well, that caused Republicans to rise to his defense, and a rise to his defense they have. And so in Maine, Republicans don't like ranked choice voting. I probably wouldn't like it either if a governor who was a member of my party knew that he could not win under a new system. So it's no surprise. Then the second congressional race, we had an incumbent Republican. The first time they go use ranked choice voting in a federal election, lo and behold, we cross a threshold where they have to use ranked choice voting. And the Republican had spent his whole entire campaign bashing on ranked choice voting. And when it came time to go use ranked choice voting strategies as a candidate, he chose not to. Instead, it was, I'm not going to use a ranked choice voting strategy. The experts that I've talked to that have dived into that second congressional district have said if that Republican would just have appealed to all voters, if he had just targeted all voters and asked them for their number 2 vote for those that were not a part of his base, he would have won that race. But he rejected the ranked choice voting strategies, just like he rejected ranked choice voting, and lost the race as a result. Now, as Republicans, we believe in personal responsibility and being accountable for your actions. If indeed our research is true, that candidate has no one to blame but himself for losing that race. So truly, this is not a liberal or a conservative issue. This is a way to empower voters to more fully express their will. And Republicans and Democrats and all the other parties alike should want that to happen, because it is absolutely foundational to the success of our form of government in this country.
Well, Stan, Elise has a question she's sharing with us, so I'm glad she is. It sort of feeds right into what you just said, and I wanted to share the question with you. Elise writes, I've heard that ranked choice voting favors centrists over extremists and encourages positive campaigning. Do you agree? And if so, can you explain why?
Well, okay, let's start on the positive campaigning. There are incentives built into election systems that cause candidates to act in a certain way. With ranked choice voting, you want your opponent's supporters to put you down as number 2. That is fundamentally a way to win elections. If you want the number 2 votes of your opponent's supporters, it does not benefit you to go bash your opponent. It benefits you to talk about issues, but not just your issues. It benefits you to talk about your opponent's issues as well. So in a ranked choice voting election, you might feel strongly about whatever the issue is, and you've got an opponent that keeps talking about another issue. Pretty soon, you're going to start talking about their issue because you want their opponent's supporters to give you their number 2 vote. So it doesn't only focus on issues, it focuses on issues of all candidates. In fact, the reason that our third parties like ranked choice voting is because their issues are heard far more loudly in a ranked choice voting election. Their candidates don't win these elections, but their issues are heard and talked about and discussed. And many times when the winner does get elected, they deal with those issues. And so that's powerful. The other thing this does for third parties is it helps them ID their voters. Under our current system, plurality elections, it's hard to tell who libertarians are, because libertarians have to go through this complicated math every time there's an election. If my candidate doesn't have a chance of being elected, don't I want to vote for the candidate who does have a chance of being elected? So how do you ID your voters if you're the Libertarian Party, or if you're the Green Party, or the Constitution Party, or the Independent? I mean, we have many, many parties in America. How do they ID their voters if their supporters can't freely vote for their candidates without worrying about the fact they might not be participating in choosing the winner? Here, you asked me a couple, I'm going to go back a little bit.
Yeah, go for it.
You asked me what the weaknesses are of ranked choice voting. And I don't think this is a weakness, but it's something we should all pay attention to. With plurality voting, there's pretty much one standard way to tabulate an election. Under ranked choice voting, there are many ways to tabulate. And so you need to pay attention to what kinds of tabulation you want to use. There is tabulation that actually encourages diversity in the winner, that encourages that candidates to be elected that might, to the casual eye, may or may not be the most likely person to have the broadest and deepest support. But that's because the tabulation method doesn't reward broadest and deepest support. What we've done in Utah is we have made awfully sure that the way that we tabulate produces the broadest and deepest support amongst the winners, because we believe that that is the fuller expression of voter will. And we believe that's what makes it a great election. But you need to pay attention to the way you tabulate ranked choice voting in the state of Washington, because that will determine a lot in terms of who gets elected. The other thing that I would tell you, it's hard to run an election with lots of candidates. So I was in a national webinar talking about the conservative case for ranked choice voting recently. Or wait, it wasn't that particular webinar. I'm in so many of these, I can't even keep them all straight. But I was in a webinar where we started talking about an election in Minneapolis where they had 35 candidates. And it was hard. It was hard to get to a winner under ranked choice voting. But frankly, it's hard to get to a winner under plurality voting too with 35 candidates. How do you have meaningful debates when you have 35 candidates? I mean, it's a function, it's not a function so much of ranked choice voting or plurality voting, it's a function of the number of candidates that you have. And so I would argue that ranked choice voting can artfully get us to a winner with a lot of candidates as well as plurality voting. Now, let me tell you one other thing that I don't like about plurality voting. I can talk about a lot of things I don't like about plurality voting. First of all, there's all these games. So in fact, in Utah, the people that oppose ranked choice voting the most, county clerks that have to run elections because they oppose all changes to elections, and then campaign managers because they know how to game the system and they would prefer to not have to learn another system. And so with plurality voting, from the beginning, our founders weren't big fans of the two-party system. Not only were they not big fans of the two-party system, but they really didn't like this notion of factions. If you read Federalist 10, we read about factions and how, I mean, they don't say anything complimentary, but there's kind of this recognition resignedly, you know, that, hey, we're going to have factions under this form of government. They thought it was going to be landowners and business people. It actually became not just landowners and business people. Today, we've got hundreds of thousands, if not millions of factions out there. And we have lobbyists that go represent the factions. And it's turned into a system that is really quite different, I think, than our founders really wanted. But one of the things that helped promote the two-party system was plurality voting, because plurality voting produces these hard choices amongst the two main parties, and it encourages people that aren't a part of these two parties to join up and become part of it. And so there are many writings of various academics that suggest that ranked choice voting contributed to this two-party system that we have today. Now, I happen to like the two-party system, but it's not necessarily a constitutional issue. It came about by that's what ended up happening after they implemented the Constitution and started meeting and started having elections and getting all the positions filled. It just gravitated towards two parties. And eventually it ended up being Republicans and Democrats. And every time a third party candidate rises up and runs for president, they get a great deal of recognition and attention, and then they flame out because in the end, people gravitate towards two parties. Well, I just suggest that ranked choice voting, again, helps empower. Hold on, somehow I've just gotten kind of kicked out here a little bit. There we go.
You're still with us.
Okay, so anyway, I like ranked choice voting because it just, it allows people to vote for the people they like the most. And as much as I like the two-party system, I'm not willing to diminish the power of the voter in order to protect my territory as a Republican. So that's the long and short of that argument.
Couple quick questions, and then we'll need to wrap up. The discussion is so good, I'm hesitant to wrap it up. But so Shell is asking, you talked about tabulation methods, different tabulation methods. And his question was, what's the tabulation method in Utah?
Yeah, the tabulation method we use, designed to produce the winner with the broadest and the deepest support. Basically, you run a ranked choice, so multiple winners. In a city council race, you run the ranked choice voting election like you would a plurality election, and then you just have multiple rounds. And so you go through round one. If nobody gets over 50%, you go back around, you eliminate the lowest receiving candidate, you tabulate again, You see if anybody got 50%. If no one did, you go eliminate the lowest vote getting candidate, and you just continue that process until somebody gets over 50%. Then that person gets put into the winner's bracket. They are a winner, and all of their number one votes get scratched out. And now their number twos become their number ones. And we do that until they fill the seats with elected officials. And that is the way that you produce an election where you get the candidates with the broadest and deepest support elected.
Okay, Stan, thanks. And so for this last question, circle back to something you mentioned. I think it was Minneapolis or Minnesota had a large number of candidates. In our primary here in Washington State, Lieutenant Governor and Governor, we had dozens of candidates in each race. And Martha brings up the example of Georgia, where there are 20 plus candidates in the Senate race. Doug Collins came in third. Her question is, why would ranked choice voting have been better in Georgia?
Because the election would be over today. You want the short answer?
There you go.
We'd already have a winner. So I had a mayor tell this to me a couple of years ago. The mayor and I were talking about ranked choice voting, and truly, I was just introducing it to him. He had just gotten done running a mayoral election. He said, Stan, we had 3 candidates in my race. I spent $50,000 to narrow it to 2 candidates. Then I had to go raise another $50,000, run exactly the same race in order to get elected. Wouldn't it have been nice if with 3 candidates, we could have had 1 election? In Utah, we compressed the time frame. We actually have now I'm talking about municipal elections, but instead of having the filing time in June, we have the filing deadline in August. And so we compress the amount of time into the election, which produces less voter fatigue. In Georgia today, can you imagine the voter fatigue that's taking place? They've been bombarded for the last 6 months with messages, and now they're getting bombarded again for exactly the same race that they had before. Essentially, you're raising, in the case of Georgia, I'm guessing hundreds of millions of dollars that you are giving to the media outlets to do exactly the same thing that you were doing 3 months ago when you had an election the first Tuesday in November. It's a crazy system. I mean, truly, if you were to sit down and say, does that make any sense? There's nobody that would say that makes sense. But that is what a plurality first past the post election, where you have a special election if somebody doesn't get 50%, that's the end result. With ranked choice voting, it is so much more elegant and artful. We're going to have an instant runoff, and somebody is going to get over 50%, and it's all happening on election night. And here's the beauty of it all. You on the night of the general election, you have the most voters turning out for the election. So you get the greatest number. I mean, why do I want to have a subset of that greatest number of voters choosing my elected officials in this special election? It will be something far less than I'm guessing they had 90% turnout on November 3rd. And I'm also guessing that the turnout is going to be much less than that in January when they have their special election. Well, why do we want to do that? Why not have the most voters choose their elected officials? Now, again, ranked choice voting builds in, you've got to be educated because you've got to figure out who your first and second and third and fourth and however many candidates there are. You got to figure that out. That produces a more educated voter. I'm telling you, particularly our young people, they love digging in to seeing who their third and fourth candidates are going to be. Who am I going to put third? Who am I going to put fourth? So anyway, I mean, you go look to Georgia. It is poster child number 1 for me in why ranked choice voting is better than plurality voting.
Okay, well, we're gonna have to leave it with that. Stuart asked a quick question which I can answer. He said, in a presidential election, what happens to the electoral college and ranked choice voting? Well, each state has their own election, so it still goes to the electoral college with each state's results. Stan, I have to say, what a pleasure being able to spend some time with you. Thank you very much on this Saturday night, taking time and sharing your experience and insights with us.
Anytime my home state wants me, bring me back, will you?
Go
Cougars. Lyle.
Go Cougars, right? So now we're going to transition a bit And I'm going to hand it off to Jesse Post and Kit Muehlman. And Jesse and Kit are both volunteers with our Whatcom County chapter. They co-lead our Ranked Choice Voting 101 team also of speakers who present to groups all over the state. And anyone can sign up on our website for a 101 session. So with that, I'll give it to Jesse and Kit.
Hello, thank you for having us. I just posted in the chat a link. So if everyone could take a look at the bottom of your Zoom, there's a little speech bubble. It says chat. And I just posted in here a link that will take you to our live ranked choice voting election. So take a moment to go away from Zoom and click that link. It should take you to your browser and just go ahead and vote.
This is an election app that we use during our Ranked Choice Voting 101 webinars. And we can't share desserts, but.
Unfortunately, not this time. So I see some votes are coming in. When you're finished voting, go ahead and come back to Zoom. We'll go ahead and go through the results together. And there's a little button at the bottom of your screen that says reactions with a smiley face. Just give us a thumbs up on your reactions when you're finished voting, and I'll keep an eye on that. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Cindy.
And while you all are finishing up, we'll introduce ourselves. I'm Kit Muehlman. I'm from the Whatcom chapter in Bellingham. And like Mark Miller, I was really upset with the political conflict and had insomnia, and so bad. And then I remembered ranked choice voting, and a light came on, and I saw what a difference that could make. And when I committed to making ranked choice voting come to Washington, suddenly I was sleeping. So this is really important to me.
And my name's Jessie. I came to ranked choice voting primarily because I lived abroad for a few years in my mid-20s, and I came back to the United States just about 2-3 years ago. And when I came back, I was just really appalled at the divisive political climate when I returned, and I wondered what had happened while I was gone. And I didn't know what I, as just a regular person, could do about it. And then I met Kit, and she was out volunteering with Fair Vote and signed me up. And I've started attending ranking parties and the events. And now I volunteer because I really believe in ranked choice voting. And what's really impactful for me and why I decided to spend my time doing this is I really believe that this is a thing that a dedicated group of citizens can bring to Washington State and have an impact. So with that, it looks like I've seen most of you guys give thumbs up. Thank you, Kit, for screen sharing, and let's take a look at the results.
Okay, so look what we have. We have, it looks like 27 votes have come in, and so there are 28 come in. And Black Forest chocolate cake is ahead with 11 votes. So that's the yellow line. And you can see pumpkin spice cake, the orange line, perfect, is 8 votes. Christmas cookies is 7, and chocolate rum balls is coming in last at 2 votes. So do we have a winner, Jessie? This is a ranked choice election. Do we have a winner?
In a ranked choice election, we do not yet have a winner. Even though Black Forest chocolate cake is ahead, it needs to be past that green dashed line you see on the right of your screen there. That's our 50% mark. Candidate has to go past that to win this election. So we don't yet have a winner. And as we said, we eliminate the candidate with the least support at this point. So that's chocolate rum balls. So if you voted for chocolate rum balls first, now you will watch your vote go to your second place choice.
And all the other votes stay right where they are. If you voted for one of the top 3 for your first choice, your vote stays right there. So we'll go to round 2. Oh, the chocolate lovers stayed with the chocolate to go to the Black Forest cake. But we still don't have a winner.
We still do not.
No one has passed 50%. So we'll go to a next round. We're going to eliminate the last place candidate. We're sorry, cookies, but we'll see who the cookie voters put in their second place. Oh, Black Forest cake is the winner, is the clear winner. And we can see that it was the winner of the first round as well, but there's a benefit to continuing in all these rounds, even though the first round winner came out ahead. Jessie, tell us, why is it good?
The benefit is that you now have a much stronger mandate. You know, if you just looked at the first round, winning with 39% of the vote, you're not sure how many of the voters really prefer you. Whereas winning with all of the votes they have, I guess that would be 57% of voters prefer Black Forest chocolate cake to second place pumpkin spice cake. It's a much stronger mandate for our eventual winner.
And I understand this happens about 85, 90% of the time. You get you can see the winner, or the winner of the first round is the winner of the final round. But 10 to 15% of the time, they're not.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for voting.